So what are we diving into today?
Well, today we're looking at a classic Monster of the Week X-Files episode, Born Again from Season 1. And for those of you who might be newer to the X-Files, Monster of the Week means that these episodes are self-contained stories. So they're not part of the larger mythology arc about aliens and government conspiracies. They're just kind of like these one-off spooky adventures.
Right, yeah. Perfect for a deep dive, I think. So what's the mission for today's deep dive? What do we want to uncover?
Okay, so we're going to break down the entire plot of Born Again for anyone who hasn't seen it or maybe needs a refresher. We're going to discuss some of the key themes, and we're going to delve into some behind-the-scenes curiosities about this episode.
Ooh, I love a good mystery.
Yeah, and this episode has it all. Reincarnation, vengeful spirits, and a good old-fashioned police procedural. So, to kick things off, how about we set the scene? Lay out the initial mystery that pulls our favorite FBI agents into the case.
Sounds good to me. Take it away.
All right, so picture this. Buffalo, New York. A detective, Sharon Lazard, finds a young girl all alone in an alley. Her name is Michelle Bishop. Now, Lazard takes Michelle back to the precinct and leaves her in an interview room with another detective, Rudolph Barbala.
I sense this is where things take a turn for the worse.
You got it. Moments later, Barbala is found dead. He's been thrown from a second-story window. Now, get this. The only witness is little Michelle, and she tells a very strange story. She says that there was another man in the room with them, and her description of this man matches a deceased detective, Charlie Morris, who died 9 years prior.
Wait, so she describes a dead man as being in the room? That's creepy right off the bat.
Right. And this is where Mulder and Scully come in. They're called in to investigate this unusual case. They try to get a clearer image of this mysterious man using a facial composite program on a computer. And get this, the computer glitches, and the face that appears is undeniably Charlie Morris.
Woo, so now we have a ghost on our hands, or is it something else entirely?
Well, and to make things even more interesting, Michelle's psychiatrist, Dr. Braun, tells Mulder about something Michelle does during her therapy sessions.
Let me guess. She talks to a doll that she claims is Charlie Morris.
Close, but even creepier. She repeatedly mutilates dolls in a very specific way. She removes their left arms and one of their eyes. And you know what's really chilling?
The way she mutilates the dolls mirrors how Charlie Morris died.
Exactly. Morris's left arm was severed in the incident that killed him.
It's way too specific to be a coincidence, right? I mean, that's got to be a big red flag.
Oh, for sure. That's enough to make even Scully raise an eyebrow. So where do they go from there?
Well, next up, they interview Morris's former partner, Tony Fiore. And right away, both Mulder and Scully pick up on the fact that Fiore is super nervous. He keeps saying that Morris's death was a result of a triad gang they were investigating, but something about his story just doesn't add up.
So Fiore is definitely suspicious. Did they find anything to actually connect him to the case?
Well, later that day, Mulder and Scully observe Fiore meeting with another guy, Leon Felder. They're discussing a safety deposit box and a large sum of money, and they mention they haven't waited the full 10 years they were supposed to. Clearly, there's something going on here, and whatever it is, it's making them nervous. 10 years. Sounds like they were laying low after something big went down.
And then, that night, things take another turn for the worse. Michelle is riding a bus when she witnesses something terrifying. Felder gets off the bus, and his scarf gets caught in the doors as they close. The bus driver takes off, and the scarf tightens, strangling Felder to death.
Hold on, his scarf gets caught and he's just dragged along with the bus.
Yeah.
And nobody stops.
Nope, the bus just keeps going. And this is where things start to really click into place for Mulder and Scully. They discover that Fiore, Barbala, Felder, and Morris all worked together in the past. And they find out the pages are missing from Morris's murder file.
Yep.
And guess who the last person to check it out was?
Fiore, it has to be.
Bingo. It's all starting to come together. But to try and understand the connection between Michelle and all of this, they decide to try something a little unconventional.
Are we talking about hypnosis?
You know it. They have Michelle undergo regression hypnosis. And during this session, she makes a claim that really throws them for a loop. She says she's 24 years old.
That's definitely not what you'd expect a young girl to say under hypnosis.
Right. And then she starts screaming, saying someone's trying to kill her. This is where Mulder's theory about reincarnation really starts to take shape. He believes that Michelle is the reincarnation of Charlie Morris, somehow carrying his memories and maybe even seeking revenge for his murder.
Okay, but if we're going with the reincarnation theory, what about the 10 years Fior and Felder mentioned? What's the significance of that?
That's a great question. And honestly, we never get a definitive answer in the episode. But there are some clues. Remember that strange death with the bus and the scarf?
Yeah, super creepy and seemingly impossible.
Right. Well, there's a theory that Michelle might be subconsciously influencing these events, maybe even using some kind of telekinesis to make things happen. It's never stated outright, but it's definitely hinted at.
Okay, so maybe she's not fully aware of her powers, or maybe she's just channeling Charlie's anger?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's another interesting detail that comes up during the hypnosis session. Just before Michelle starts freaking out, there's a burst of static on the recording. And when they analyze the static, they see an image of a diver in a suit.
A diver? What's that all about?
Well, it turns out to be a pretty important clue. Meanwhile, Scully, ever the skeptic, discovers something crucial during Morris's autopsy.
Don't tell me his arm was reattached.
No, nothing like that. But she finds salt water in his lungs, which means he was drowned. This completely contradicts the original theory that he was killed by a gang.
So he wasn't shot or stabbed, he was drowned.
Exactly. And then Mulder and Scully put two and two together. They remember seeing an exotic fish tank in Fiore's house with a very similar diver ornament to the one they saw in the static.
They drowned him in the fish tank. That's cold.
Yeah, pretty messed up. So Mulder and Scully race over to Fiore's house, and they find Michelle there, and she's using telekinesis to try and hurt Fiore.
Whoa, so she does have powers.
Seems like it. They manage to stop her, and Fiore finally confesses. He admits that he, Felder, and Barbara were involved in stealing a bunch of money, and they killed Morris to keep him quiet. Fiore tries to claim that he didn't actually want Morris dead, that he only wanted to take care of Morris's wife, Anita, but yeah, not a great excuse.
Yeah, I mean, murdering your partner to take care of his wife, that's twisted logic.
Totally. Anyway, in a final act of vengeance, Michelle uses her powers to destroy the fish tank, but she spares Fiore after Anita begs her to. Fiore ultimately goes to jail, and Michelle seems to recover and returns to being a normal kid. At least for now.
So classic X-Files ending, a bit of resolution, but with that lingering question of whether the paranormal activity is truly gone.
Exactly. Now, for the fun part, let's dive into some of the behind-the-scenes secrets and curiosities surrounding Born Again. We're going to get a little nostalgic, uncover those hidden layers that make this episode even more fascinating.
Lead the way. I'm ready for some juicy tidbits.
So, Born Again first aired on April 22nd, 1994, though some sources say it might have been a few days earlier, on the 19th. Just a little inconsistency to add to the mystery, right?
Oh, I love a good discrepancy. Adds to the intrigue. What about the audience reception back then? Did people love it? Hate it?
It got decent ratings, about 7.7 million households tuned in, and it snagged a Nielsen rating of 8.2. But the critical response was a little mixed.
Mixed, huh? Like some people thought it was amazing and others thought it was a total flop.
Not quite. It's more like a lot of folks saw it as a decent episode, well made, but not necessarily one of the most memorable. But what I find really interesting is that even the people involved in making the episode had mixed feelings about it.
Oh, really? Spill the tea. Who wasn't a fan?
Well, the writer, Howard Gordon, actually expressed some disappointment. He felt it was a bit too similar to another episode he wrote, Shadows, and thought it didn't quite live up to its full potential.
Wow, even the writer wasn't fully satisfied. What about Chris Carter? I mean, he was the mastermind behind the whole show.
Yeah, well, even Chris Carter wasn't completely on board with Born Again. He said he liked some of the special effects, but he also thought the direction was a little sloppy. Although he did appreciate the episode's realism, particularly the idea of a killer marrying the victim's widow, which he found pretty disturbing.
Yeah, that is pretty messed up. But hey, sometimes the darkest stories are the ones that feel the most real, right?
Right. And get this, David Duchovny reportedly hated this episode.
No way! But his then-girlfriend Maggie Wheeler was even in it. You'd think that would make it a little more special for him.
You'd think, right. But apparently not. No one really knows why he disliked it so much.
That's a mystery for another deep dive, maybe.
Definitely. Okay, now, for a really cool behind-the-scenes story. Remember that scene at the beginning where Barbara is thrown through the window?
Yeah, the sugar glass window.
Exactly. Well, during filming, they accidentally broke the real window next to the sugar glass one.
Oops, I'd love to have been a fly on the wall when that happened.
Right. Well, they had to think fast. And the key grip, Al Campbell, came up with a clever solution. They put Barbala's dog next to his body in the shot to make it look like the dog might have broken the second window.
That's hilarious. A little bit of on-set improvisation to save the day. I love it.
Yeah, it's a great example of how sometimes mistakes can lead to some creative problem solving. Now, our fun facts source really sums up Born Again well. They call it a classic ghost story with a twist. And they point out that it's one of the first X-Files episodes to really explore reincarnation, which is a theme that comes back in later seasons.
Right, like in The Field Where I Died, where Mulder basically falls in love with a woman he believes is his soulmate from a past life. Heavy stuff.
Totally. And it's interesting that Mulder's belief in reincarnation is pretty clear in this episode, early on in the series. It's a theme that's definitely important to him.
Definitely. You know, there's another interesting connection in this episode. Charlie Morris, the murder detective, shares his name with a real person who worked on the show. Yeah, Chuck Morris was a longtime prop master for the X-Files. It's very likely that the name Charlie Morris was an inside joke or a tribute to him.
That's a cool little detail. Makes you wonder how many other hidden tributes or inside jokes are tucked away in these episodes.
Oh, I'm sure there are tons. We'll have to keep an eye out for them in our future deep dives.
Agreed. Now, something else worth mentioning is that Born Again is one of the few episodes in season 1 that's purely supernatural. Most of the early episodes really focus on the alien conspiracy storyline.
Right, and this episode really goes for that classic ghost story vibe. We've got the vengeful spirit, the innocent child who becomes a conduit for the supernatural. It's almost like a nod to Poltergeist in a way.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder that the X-Files could handle all kinds of spooky stories, not just aliens. And let's not forget the classic Mulder and Scully dynamic. Scully, as always, is looking for a rational explanation to Michelle's behavior, while Mulder is totally open to the possibility of reincarnation. That push and pull between their beliefs is part of what makes this show so compelling.
Absolutely. And in this episode, I think it's particularly interesting because they're both dealing with a case that's deeply personal and emotional. They're not just chasing aliens or monsters. They're trying to understand the pain and trauma that's driving these events.
That's a great point. It adds another layer to their dynamic, doesn't it? They're not just partners. They're friends who are trying to support each other while navigating these dark and disturbing situations.
Exactly. So to wrap things up, we've explored the chilling story of Born Again, delved into the themes of betrayal, revenge, and the power of the supernatural, and we've uncovered some fascinating behind-the-scenes details that add another layer to the viewing experience.
It really shows how a single episode can have so much depth and complexity, even if it's not part of the larger mythology arc.
And it leaves us with a few things to ponder. Knowing that the creator and star of the show weren't huge fans of this episode, what does that say about the nature of creative work and the way different people interpret the same story? And maybe even more broadly, what other forgotten episodes from our favorite shows might hold equally surprising secrets and fascinating backstories waiting to be discovered?
Those are great questions. Hopefully this deep dive has encouraged you to revisit Born Again with a new perspective, or maybe even dive into those overlooked episodes from your own favorite shows.
And we're already looking forward to our next deep dive, so keep sending in your sources, and we'll see you back here soon.
See you next time.